Jeff, I've got a question for you. And I actually wrote this down, believe it or not. You know that I never, ever, ever prepare for interviews or write
I
things down.
I'm nervous now.
So my question is, what is going on with Verizon, Chipotle, Wendy's, McDonald's, CarMax, Amazon, Rivian, and Facebook? Just to name a few.
What's going on with those? There's not enough bank reserves. Haven't you heard, George?
There you go. There you
The
go.
Fed's
That's
doing
it.
too much QT, and now it's coming back to bite us.
All right, but explain here what's going on, how this is a reflection on the real economy, and then I want to take that and kind of parlay it into what's going on with the shadow banking, what's going on with private credit, and then we'll take that into what's happening with repo, and then we'll take that into what's happening with the Fed's balance sheet and if that's actually doing anything.
Yeah, well, I mean, what's going on in the real economy is just continued weakness, which is finally getting to the point, maybe even a tipping point, where we go from, we've been in this no hire, no fire environment for several years, which everybody just kind of dismissed as, oh, this is, it's not that bad. We don't see layoffs, so the economy must be fine. But, when nobody's hiring, that's going to lead you down the road to something bad eventually. We don't know how long it's going to take, but you get to a situation where there's just not enough income going around. It doesn't matter about price changes, that we don't have enough income being generated in the economy to pay for the price changes from 3 years ago. And people fall further and further behind. It's not just consumers. Businesses fall further and further behind. Plus, you add the fact that we never really recovered in 2021 and 2022. It looked like a recovery because prices soared ahead. And so it created this illusion of recovery. So what you have is, and what we've had is over the last several years, businesses thought there was going to be this roaring, booming comeback from the pandemic. All the governments had done it. The Fed, the federal government, the Europeans, everybody. They had thrown a bunch of stimulus in the pot. It was going to create this massive recovery wave. We saw it in consumer prices. It looked like it was inflationary. So businesses did what they always do. They see all these signals, they hear from their economists, and they start hiring people, anticipating that there's going to be a recovery. But it very quickly, by 2022, they figured out this isn't a recovery. It's an illusion. And that they had actually hired too many people. But rather than fire everybody right away back in 2022, they said, well, maybe over time the economy will come back. And so, yeah, we've got too many workers on our books now, but eventually a demand will come up and we won't, we'll have something for them to do. We don't really want to get rid of them in case we're wrong, because we just went through hell trying to secure workers, the labor shortage in 2021. So let's just hold on to the workers. But obviously we don't need to hire anybody else. We've got more than enough employees as it is. So hiring just stopped. Everybody had more than enough employees, but what that meant was there just wasn't going to be enough private income circulating through the economy. And slowly over the next couple of years, even though we didn't have layoffs, there was no hiring, and people kept falling further and further behind because there wasn't enough income circulating. And eventually you get to a point where, first of all, those employers are going to say, we still have too many workers. We don't actually see demand coming up like we thought. So let's start getting rid of some of them. It's not just a no hire, no fire environment. Now it becomes a no hire. Hey, let's start firing some people. And the danger with that is, where you get into the traditional recession mechanics, is that when you start firing some people, it pushes the entire economy, especially the consumer economy, past the tipping point, where you go from no hire, no fire to no hire, some fire to no hire, a lot of fire really quickly. That's what, the flat part of the beverage curve.
And that's usually when you get the unemployment rate spike.
That's what, because it's nonlinear. That's the other thing you got to keep in mind, that this is kind of like a parabolic increase where you're, for the last couple of years where it's no hiring, the parabolic increase was the part, that you can barely detect. And all of a sudden it just kind of starts to go up like this. So the danger is with Verizon and Chipotle and Amazon and UPS and all these big name announcements that are cutting tens of thousands of jobs, is that we might be at that point where we're going from no hire, some fire to no hire and a lot of fire. That's the risk. It's not confirmed yet, but I mean, the Challenger data, all the labor market data from ADP and a bunch of others suggesting that the job shedding has accelerated here.
Yeah, the way I look at it is you had all of the government distortions from 2020, 2021, and demand did skyrocket. There's no getting around that. So aggregate demand goes up, and then you've got a restaurant owner, and they've got a line out the door every single day for lunch. and you can't get a reservation for 3 weeks. So they're thinking it's because their restaurant's awesome, not knowing that it's did all these government distortions. So of course, what are they going to do? They're going to hire more employees, and they're probably going to set up more restaurants. They're going to borrow money. They're going to, they're going to try to build, or they're trying to buy a space, or they're going to try to set up more locations, because obviously my pizzas are the best thing in town. And then you start getting this reality where aggregate demand starts to go down because prices have gone up, but wages haven't kept pace. And then let's just say the stimulus, whether that's in the form of not having to pay your rent, PPP, and outright check, that starts to go away, or you don't have it anymore. So then you have this reality, and I always just do this, right? Because prices go up, wages stay the same. So you get that spread that people start to see, and like, wait a minute, my overall purchasing power is less than it was in 2019, even though my nominal wages might have gone up slightly. So then you have aggregate demand go down, but then the businesses still think they're great, and they still remember the demand for 2022, and they still think that that's coming back very, very soon. Especially, remember, Jeff, when the Fed drops interest rates, then all that demand is going to come rushing back. So we're going to hang on to the employees. But as the aggregate demand decreases and decreases and decreases because people's purchasing power shrinks, finally, the businesses realize that even if we want to keep these employees, even if we think this demand is coming back, we can't afford to. We're between a rock and a hard place, and we've got to go ahead and pull the ripcord. So that's how I would describe what's happening.
Yeah, and George, the process of coming down, I mean, we had so many unique features of the pandemic. I mean, so interpretation was going to be difficult to begin with because you don't really have a lot of, history to rely on, at least certainly not living memory. So as that process took place, it was a slow thing. It wasn't like, the restaurant was booming and then the next day it wasn't. Right. The restaurant was booming, and then the next day it's still booming, but it's a little bit less. And then 2 months later, it's just a tiny bit less. And so for business owners, you can see what they were thinking, like, okay, it's just a little bit of a soft patch. We just get through the next couple of months and, everything will start soaring again. And then the soft patch got a little bit softer. And you think, okay, it'll turn around, maybe in a couple of months down the road. And so everybody just, kind of didn't really know what was going on. So you turn on the TV or you go to social media and Jay Powell says everything's fine, don't worry about it. And CNBC says, look at the stock market, everything's booming. It doesn't matter what president's in office. They say the economy is roaring. So you think, okay, we were booming and then it got a little softer. Maybe things will just pick up and turn around, next day, next month or next year or something like that. So there wasn't that dramatic V-shaped downturn where, everybody just said, okay, we got to start firing workers because demand fell off and it's not coming back anytime soon. Mm-hmm. It's just been this slow, it's almost like the proverbial boiling frog, right? The downside temperature got turned up a little bit at a time. And before anybody really realized it, it was like, okay, now things are we're way behind.
Yeah. Another thing that I've been thinking about that ties into what you're saying in this whole cycle is, let's just assume for a moment that real GDP has been 2%. We'll just use that just as for easy math. But a large part of that 2% that we have had over the last, let's say, 3 or 4 years has been a result of fraud, quite literally fraud. And so, even if all else being equal, if you eliminate the fraud, then that's going to have a massive, massive impact on the real GDP, whether it's positive or whether it's negative. So when you combine all the fraudulent collateral, all the loans that were made that otherwise would not have been made because the tide was in, let's say, and the tide was very, very high. So the higher the tide is, the more people can go out there and swim naked. So we have all these people swimming naked, but those people that were swimming naked were the reason why GDP was maybe positive instead of negative. So my point here is that even if, all is the same, if we have less fraud and we have less credit extension, then that's going to have a huge impact on GDP. And that in of itself could take you into an economic contraction. And that, I guess, just exacerbates what you're talking about with the bullwhip effect with all of these real world companies like Verizon, Amazon, Chipotle, Wendy's, CarMax, etc.
Yeah, and the idea that you fake it till you make it, I mean, that's exactly what you're talking about. Let's be honest here. The fraud was part of it. You go back to 2021 and 2022, they didn't care. All they cared about was that money was out there in the economy, because all the Keynesian economists told it doesn't matter how the money gets out there. As long as it gets out there, it's going to get spent. It's going to create the recovery. Right. All government stimulus is literally fake it till you make it. That's why stimulus never works, because that's not how an economy works. So the fraud was a huge part, and that's why nobody cared. That's why the government didn't stop. I mean, yes, the cronies were getting rich off of it, but that's part of it. But nobody cared that there was a tremendous amount of fraud, because from the government, a purely Keynesian economic perspective, it does not matter. You go back and read Keynes's general theory. That's what you do. You just throw money out there, and after it goes and circulates through the economy, it's supposed to lead to a virtuous circle that becomes a recovery. That's not how an economy actually works, but the fraud was part of it. And eventually, the economy gets to a point where it can't just simply operate on fraud at the margins and create a sustainable advance. And that's where we've been moving toward that for the last couple of years, but more visibly the downside effects of it really since last summer. But what really got the Federal Reserve to start cutting rates was finally realizing that the economy that got further enough away from the fake it part of it, the fraud part of it, just did not look like it was supposed to. It was supposed to be taking off and accelerating, and instead, no matter which way you looked, it was decelerating. Not just a U.S. problem. You could see the same thing happen across the rest of the world too. So you had this deceleration in 2024 that surprised the hell out of everyone, which is why central bank rates started to go like this. Remember, it was going to be higher for longer. I mean, everybody said, rates are going to stay up here. And then they said, well, no, we got rates where we want them. We'll just leave them there for a couple of years. And that never happened. They left them there for a couple of months. And then all of a sudden, all these central banks are starting cutting rates. That was why. They expected that the stimulus would lead to second and third order positive effects that would lead to an accelerating recovery. And then that, got delayed into 2023, and then it got delayed into 2024. And you get to 2024 and things are really starting to decelerate. They're like, okay, now we got to start cutting rates again. So the fraud was part of it. It was supposed to be a major issue or major factor leading to the recovery, which just blows your mind that they actually think that way.
Yeah, but the point there that I'm trying to make is, once the tide goes out a little bit, you see that there is this, and I'm talking about the banking system, the monetary system. So they see that there is this fraud that they kind of papered over or just ignored before. And now all of a sudden they have to pay attention to it, because, okay, well, if that's bad collateral, then maybe all these other loans have bad collateral as well. So I'm not going to lend at all until I figure out what's going on. And that in and of itself makes the tide go out even further and expose more people that are swimming naked. Yeah. And then the more people that you see that are swimming naked, the more the banks pull back on credit. They tighten lending standards. They reduce liquidity, and that just makes the tide go out even further. And I think that's kind of the point in the cycle where we are right now. So then the question becomes, okay, if the Fed does QE, will that make the tide come back in? And it's an honest question. I think you and I have the same view on this, but what would your answer be?
No, of course, QE doesn't do anything. It's good for the news media. It's good for the Federal Reserve to say it's doing something, but even its proponents, they can't really find any effect.
Why does it not do anything, Jeff?
Because it doesn't fix the problem that we have. And let's go back to what you just said, George. Before you get to the tide going out, you have to understand just human nature. We see these same things in every bubble cycle in human history. People have this innate ability, maybe it's evolutionary, to fool themselves. We rationalize good things because when good things are happening, when it's fun, everything, it's always fun on the way up, right? And you never want it to end. So all these credit providers, whether they actually believed it was fraudulent and, faked and everything else, didn't matter. It gave them cover to do what they wanted to do, which was just to make as much money as they possibly could while they could.
Yeah.
So while Jay Powell's on TV saying solid, strong and resilient economy, solid, they said, I don't really see it in the credit scores on people I'm looking at, but I don't freaking care. Jay Powell says so. I've got legal cover. I've got collateral. It's not real collateral. I've never verified it, but I've got theoretical collateral. Boom, deal after deal after deal, volume. So while all that's going on, and while this story that's created in the mainstream about a booming economy, the stock market continues to go higher, that just adds more to the rationalization. As long as that continues, the stupidity gets stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stupider and stupider and stupider.
And Jeff, real quick, I just want to point out to the viewers that deal after deal after deal is creating aggregate demand in the real economy that
more fake.
GDP. Yeah, that's completely artificial. It's a sugar rush, and inevitably it's got to come to an end.
So the point is, when you get to stupid, and it just piles up and it piles up and it piles up, and it's, we have all of this collateral that's supposed to make everything safe, but it's actually a bunch of dumb collateral. It's fraudulent. Nobody's ever bothered to look at it.
Right.
So when you get to the tipping point where things go to the other side and everybody starts to say, oh, hold up here. Now we're at the point where we have to actually look at details and scrutinize reality and look at things, and we don't like what we see. It's almost like once the toothpaste is out of the tube, you can't get it back in. So even if QE was money printing, it still wouldn't matter, because the tide has shifted and risk taking disappears, because there has to be, everybody knows. Everybody in the system knows. Everybody knew it while it was taking place. There's going to come a day when all this stupid's going to come back on everybody, and we have to start apportioning losses. So this thing is done. Doesn't matter what the Fed does. Doesn't matter what the Federal Reserve does or the federal government does. This thing is done. The credit cycle has shifted to the point that the only way to restart it is to get everybody to assign the losses and be relatively sure that the losses have been assigned, and we can start fresh all over again. That's what a recession cycle is really supposed to be. It's supposed to clean out all the stupidity and kind of start again. Now, you hope the recession, the downturn isn't bad enough. You hope you don't go into a liquidity crisis, but that's what a contraction is supposed to be. It's getting rid of all the idiocy and, expunging it from the system so that you can start fresh all over again. So again, we're at the point where we're just at the top of the top of the Minsky curve, where everybody's taking a look at what all the stupidity that's been taking place and thinking, oh, we got a long way to go to the bottom. So, now we're looking at collateral, we're looking at actual lending arrangements. We're actually going to scrutinize, what the economy is doing, not just take Jay Powell's word for it. And so there's not a whole lot that's going to happen here that's going to be able to turn everything around and just get everybody to say, oh, forget about all that stuff we did that was really stupid. Let's start taking more stupid risks again. So
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because
it has to.
Yeah, because then they tighten the belt. The credit providers, the liquidity goes away, and that makes the problem that much more worse.
And it doesn't, right, George? It doesn't matter where it comes from, because it could start over here, it could start over here. It's just like, wherever the snowball starts or the spark gets, lights the fuse. The portfolio that performs in one economic regime can get crushed in the next. So in this free webinar, we're going to reveal what those 4 economic regimes are, how to identify them, as well as the assets, historically speaking, best positioned to perform in every environment. So reserve your seat now and learn how to prepare your portfolio before the economy shifts again.